If there's one thing that's kept the name Doom up near the top of the list of first-person shooters, it's how it's always boldly reinventing being a badass, superpowered, one-man army against the armies of hell. 3 decades ago, we got the original old-school running guns, then a jump-scare-laden horror shooter, then a modern reimagining of that old-school running gun, and then a mobility-focused action shooter in 2020's Doom Eternal. The form that Doom: The Dark Ages takes on is actually one that is very different from Eternal, a game that I rank as one of my favorite shooters of all time. In fact, it's so different that initially I was turned off by the heavier feel of the movement, the lack of a double jump or air dash, and the sheer chaos of having wide open fields with seemingly hundreds of enemies closing in on me from all sides. But a few hours into the 20+ hour campaign, my arsenal had expanded. The ways in which I could dispatch enemies had diversified, and I'd started to better understand and appreciate what Doom: The Dark Ages was and what it wasn't. By the end of it, I was left grinning like a Doom guy that just picked up a super shotgun as I ripped and tore until it was done. Doom: The Dark Ages campaign is all about setting up the dark sci-fi fantasy vibes. It follows our strong, mostly silent Doomslayer before he was awoken in a sarcophagus in a UAC space station back in Doom 2016. Of course, the Slayer himself isn't much more than just a vehicle for badassery, so it's not like we're seeing a new side of him or getting any sort of deeper look at this character's origins or motivations. Instead, the Dark Ages story is more about filling in the blanks in the Doom universe, diving into the history of the conflict between humans and demons, and further fleshing out both the faction of humanity defending Sentinels and the deity-like Makers.
Launch the Slayer.
And in that way, it's not only serviceable, but it also does a good job of taking us to both a wide variety of hellish landscapes that include sci-fi themed medieval castles, and a very welcome trip to the Lovecraftian-inspired cosmic realm, which features a ton of really cool mind-bending puzzles and creepy settings that are different from what we've seen before. Perhaps the best thing about the story is that it no longer feels like it's just the Slayer against the nameless forces of hell. There are human companions that are central to the plot.
Maybe he didn't survive.
It regularly feels like you're fighting alongside humanity in this giant all-out war against the demons, and there's actual intrigue involving the mysterious Makers and their role in this whole conflict. This is the strongest a Doom story has ever been, even if that's not a bar you'd have to double jump over. Besides the setting, the big thing that separates Doom: The Dark Ages from previous entries in the series is the addition of the Slayer's shield, and all the abilities that come with it. Now, rather than being forced to avoid taking damage by constantly staying on the move and jumping around like a madman, you're often encouraged to charge straight forward into danger with your shield at the ready to either block or deflect enemy attacks. Any attack that is red can be blocked until your shield's depleted, and anything that's green can be reflected with a well-timed guard to not only deal substantial damage, but also stun most monsters it hits. Even on Nightmare difficulty, which is what I did my playthrough on, the parry timing is very generous. But fortunately, you can fine-tune it however you like in the menus, along with a ton of other handy difficulty modifiers. The other key shield technique is a charging bash attack that can be used to quickly close the distance between you and your enemy. Think the Super Shotgun's grapple in Doom Eternal, only faster. You can use it with any weapon, and it's on a relatively quick cooldown. I know, fun, right? This combination of being able to use the shield both defensively to block and stun, and then offensively to quickly zip in and out is what really elevates the Dark Ages combat to the stratosphere by making it still feel very fast and exciting, even with the removal of things like double jumps, quick dashes, and fast weapon swaps. We get the best of both worlds, in that this Slayer is still extremely mobile, but also feels like a heavily armored tank thanks to loud footsteps and a devastating shockwave when you land from a high jump. The shield's utility doesn't end there either. Eventually, you'll also get the ability to toss the shield out Captain America style to instantly decapitate tons of fodder enemies all at once. Or, if you use it against larger enemies, it will continuously buzzsaw into them, keeping them incapacitated for a short while. This is an extremely useful skill, but I found it to be especially potent against the Arachnotron enemies that like to pepper me with a constant stream of non-reflectable bullets. If they're unarmored, I can just toss my shield to stop them from shooting, dash in, and all it takes is a single Super Shotgun blast to ready them for an execution. Those abilities are key to surviving tough fights because almost every enemy in Doom the Dark Ages has some sort of weakness like this, and unlike Doom Eternal, they are rarely weapon specific. There's no more switching to the combat shotgun specifically to pop a grenade into a cacademon's mouth, then swapping to the rifle to snipe the guns off of a revenant, then swapping between shots of your super shotgun and ballista to quickly burst down a marauder or other big beefy enemy, etc. That's fun in its own way, and I'm sure there will be those out there, like myself, who still prefer it overall, but the Dark Ages still manages to find a way to be an absolute blast without requiring a StarCraft Pros level of APM on the harder difficulties. The enemies are largely the same usual suspects that have been in most of the other Dooms. You've got your Imps, Hell Knights, Mancubi, and the aforementioned Arachnotron, and even the Cyber Demon, all of whom behave as you would expect. Others have gotten new facelifts to better match with the new setting, like the Pinky, who's now a mount with a Demon Archer riding him, and the new Cacodemon that hails from the Cosmic Realm. The Dark Ages even brings back the Vagary as a mini-boss who hasn't been seen since Doom 3. Overall, there's a nice variety in the enemies, and even those you fought a million times before have a few new tricks to make them fit better in the Dark Ages combat. Speaking of enemies, it's worth mentioning as well that id has exponentially jacked up the number of on-screen nasties relative to Doom or Eternal. When you get a bird's eye view of the battlefield, it truly looks like an all-out war against the minions of hell. This did lead to a bit of frustration for me early on, as I was often getting attacked from behind by enemies that would spawn in without warning, but all it took was some adjustment in how I approached certain combat encounters. I had to make sure that I was using my shield bash to disengage in addition to engaging to keep them off my back. One noteworthy omission from the Dark Ages is the iconic chainsaw that has been used since Doom 2016 as a way to instantly kill a single enemy and regain ammo in the process. That has been replaced by an all-new melee system that lets you get up close and personal and engage in melee brawls that also restore your ammo. I do miss the satisfaction of sawing an imp or other small enemy in half, but this system works better for what Doom the Dark Ages is trying to achieve by again making you rush towards the fight rather than away from it. The ammo pickups for your melee attack are also much more plentiful than the gas for the chainsaw in either Doom 2016 or Eternal, making me run out of ammo far less, which was something that I very much appreciated. As far as the actual weapons go, the Dark Ages plays around a lot with the look of each weapon to give it an old-timey flavor, but the functions are generally all the same as what we've come to know and love from the series. All of the satisfyingly punchy stalwarts are accounted for. The combat and super shotguns, an assault rifle that shoots out rail spikes instead of bullets, a plasma rifle, and a long-range single-shot weapon in the form of a satisfying steel ball launcher called the Steel Shot, just to name a handful. The only really unique weapon of the bunch is the Skull Crusher Pulverizer, which sort of behaves like the chain gun, but has a ridiculous spread that can just absolutely shred a football's field worth of fodder enemies. It's a fun weapon that goes great with the Dark Ages' absolutely insane amount of on-screen enemies at once, even though I typically opted to use the shield throw to mow down the hordes of fodder, since there's an upgrade that powers up the shield charge when you do. One interesting twist for how the Dark Ages handles its arsenal is that just about every gun has a sister weapon that uses the same ammo type and can be hot swapped between with the press of a button. So, for example, along with a rocket launcher, there's a grenade launcher. In addition to the aforementioned pulverizer that does a little bit of damage spread out over a wide area, there's a Ravager that concentrates the fire to hit single enemies. It all adds up to a ton of variety in the gunplay, and while I was never forced to swap between my weapons in the same way that I was in Doom Eternal, I still found myself jumping from gun to gun simply because it's fun. But the absolute best part about the toolbox in the Dark Ages is, and this is a credit to the weapon designers at id because this is true for just about every Doom game, that every gun retains its usefulness throughout the entire game. Sure, I might have my favorites and gravitate more towards the Super Shotgun, Rocket Launcher, and Steel Shot, but even the early weapons stay relevant once you get some upgrades into them. If I'm low on armor, I can swap to the Combat Shotgun that I upgraded to ignite enemies and make them drop armor shards. If I need health, I can swap to the Ravager to make them bleed health pickups. And if I need to incapacitate an enemy while also dealing damage to others nearby, I can throw my shield into a baddie, shoot the shield, and watch as my bullets ricochet and hit everyone else around. To sweeten the pot, all of these abilities and weapons are sprinkled at a measured pace throughout the campaign. There was never even a chance for the gunplay to get stale because every level would give me a new gun, or a new ability for my shield, or a new melee weapon, or I'd find enough gold to afford a new upgrade at the shop that would alter something I already had in a way that made me want to use it more. And it's this need to upgrade that fed into my desire to explore and find both upgrade currencies and the more traditional Doom collectibles like figurines, weapon skins, and lore pickups. Appropriately, the levels of the Dark Ages welcome that exploration with open arms. While they all vary in size, the smaller stages are still big by the series standards, and the big levels are gigantic. They're huge, open battlefields with tons of secrets, challenging enemy encounters, and more than a few breathtaking vistas. Breaking up all the running and gunning are giant mecha battles and flying sections where you pilot the Slayer's dragon. Yes, the Doom Slayer has a dragon, because why not? These sections are shallow compared to the rest of the Dark Ages, with the mecha sections amounting to little more than a simple game of dodge, punch, punch, dodge, punch, punch. And the dragon bits are little more than dodge, shoot, shoot, dodge, shoot, shoot. That said, they're kind of like a turret sequence in that they're infrequent and brief enough to never drag the pacing down, and they at least provide cool moments in the cutscenes that precede and follow them. And then there's the soundtrack. Holy hell. If you've played a Doom game before, you probably know what to expect going in, but even so, I was gleefully into it. It's another banger of a heavy metal soundtrack that had me coming back to certain levels after beating the campaign and just turning down all of the volume except for the music so I could listen without it being overpowered by the sounds of shotgun blasts, explosions, and dying demons. Far from just being more Doom, Doom the Dark Ages is a new flavor of the legendary shooter series that's heavier and more grounded, but no less energetic and exhilarating. The new shield is an outstanding addition that adds a ton of both offensive and defensive options, and when combined with the extensive arsenal of traditional Doom guns, provides a ton of fun and exciting ways to dispatch the hundreds upon thousands of demons that stand in your way. Add on top of that another pumped up heavy metal soundtrack backing the excellent weapon, level, and enemy design, and it has once again proven that like a super shotgun blast from point blank range, they don't miss.
Executive Reviews editor Tom Marks here with Mitchell Saltzman, talk a little bit more about his review of Doom the Dark Ages. Mitchell, most folk I think know you at IGN as an action and fighting game reviewer. You know, why did you want to review Doom the Dark Ages specifically, which is, you know, not a departure from what you usually play, the games you're into, but a departure from what you usually review at IGN?
Well, I would say there's two reasons. First reason, Doom has been a big part of my childhood. I remember like going to my friend's house whose dad had it installed on their computer, and like, you know, we would go, and it was like the first time I was ever blown away by a game's graphics. It also was like just kind of like a conversation piece that you'd have at school where you're like, oh my god, have you played Doom? You can chainsaw people in half in that game. It's crazy. And then the second reason I would say is, you know, here's the secret. The way that Doom has evolved, especially recently, ever since 2016, it's kind of become an action game. It really scratches those same itches that a game like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta does. You know, when I'm playing Doom the Dark Ages, my brain is going like 100 miles an hour. I'm like thinking to myself, okay, I'm gonna zip over here, I'm gonna super shotgun this guy, execute him. Oh no, I'm taking damage. I'm gonna, you know, go to these fodder guys over here, you know, get a bunch of health. Then I'm gonna, oh, that guy has a explosive barrel next to him. I'm gonna shoot that, zip over here, etc., etc. It's the same kind of like, you know, thing as Devil May Cry, where I'm like, I'm gonna uppercut this guy, jump in the air, attack, jump cancel, attack, jump cancel, knock him away, pull him back, slam him down. It's that feeling of having your brain just constantly go. And that's what I've always really loved about the action game genre. And Doom really scratches those same kind of itches, especially Doom Dark Ages.
This is a thing that I think comes up when people are talking about Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, which are both well-loved games, right? But they also sometimes feel like there's a little bit of a schism between them. They're kind of different in subtle ways that become important. Why do you think that is? Where do you land in that conversation between those two past Doom games? And then also, where do you think the Dark Ages fits between them.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm a big action guy, so Doom Eternal is, you know, the pinnacle, I would say, of shooters for me. Like, it's probably my favorite shooter of all time. But it is interesting because, you know, you look at the Metacritic of Doom Eternal, and you would think that it is universally beloved. But everyone that I've personally talked to has a divisive opinion on that. They either really, really love it, or they're like, oh man, it's just not Doom 2016, man. And the reality is that, you know, Doom has changed. Every iteration of Doom has been kind of the same core, but it's been kind of a different flavor. And some people just don't like the flavor of Doom Eternal. They don't like, you know, having to constantly be low on ammo on certain weapons that they like using. They don't like, you know, having to quickly swap between two weapons to burst down really tough enemies. And, you know, they might not like just the fact that you have to constantly be double jumping, constantly dashing, constantly, you know, on the move to avoid dying in that game. Doom Eternal is also very hard. I would say Doom the Dark Ages brings down the difficulty substantially compared to Doom Eternal, and that might be something that people might not really appreciate about it. But I kind of look at it as, you know, this is doing something different that I can still appreciate, and Doom Eternal still exists. I can still go back to Doom Eternal and play that anytime I want. But this is fun in a different way. A different but similar way.
In your review, you do talk about this idea that, you know, there's this huge arsenal, all the weapons are fun, all the weapons stay relevant late into the game, are used in these sort of specialized scenarios where they're better or worse, or you might prefer one or the other. But I do want to know, because this is going to be a question, right? You got to have a favorite. You got to have something that just made you smile to use it. What weapon do you just want to gush about?
I mean, I mentioned it so many times in the review, but the Super Shotgun, man, there's just something about id shotguns that is just so satisfying. It's hard to beat, man. It's hard to beat just getting up in someone's face, blasting 50 pellets into their giant bloated chests, and then just watching them explode.
Well, I guess the only question I'm left with is, you know, Final Fantasy 16 kind of morphed from an RPG into an action game, and Doom has morphed from a shooter to an action game. So is Devil May Cry just the end point of all video games, is the real thing we have to be wondering at this point?
You know what? If we're moving towards a perfect world, I would say I would like to see that.
Well, Mitchell, thank you so much for chatting with me a little bit more about your review, your tastes. If you want more from Mitchell, his last review was Fatal Fury City of the Wolves. You can check out that. We have another conversation about that game at the end there. If you want more action shootery type games, we recently reviewed La Chimera and Shotgun Cop Man. Check both of those out as well. Shotgun Cop Man, also a game where you're shooting shotguns in hell. So maybe
that game is so cool, man. I want to play that so bad. I just haven't had time.
Well, maybe now that the review's done, maybe that's what
probably not. I got another one coming up.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Well, keep an eye out for that one and any other games on IGN.